and indeed a review of culture and governance in RTE. But there's a number of things we really need to add to that. I mean, first of all, I put it to Siún Irala and the executive last week at the Arts Committee that this was a deliberately orchestrated deceit of the public to hide these payments and then deceive the public, the Oireachtas, the licence payer and the workers in RTE. And we still don't have the full truth about that. So we need full disclosure from everybody who is in any way involved in hatching a plot to make these secret payments and to hide that fact. And that means that Dee Forbes, the former Director of Content, Ryan Tubridy, Noel Kelly need to come into the committees and explain what they knew about all this, so we can have the full picture about this really outrageous attempt to hide these enormous payments and to deceive the public on a matter of huge public interest and where significant amounts of public money were at stake. We also think that, while audits and review of governance and culture are welcome, that there's some things that should be totally obvious about this, and that is, and we've again have said this from the outset, that there need to be salary caps. It is just outrageous that you're talking about salary levels for people at the very top of RTE being 4, 5, 6 and 7 times what ordinary RTE workers are getting, and then you have ordinary workers and journalists having to put up with low pay, pay cuts, pay freezes, and in many cases very poor contracts and conditions of employment. That has to be addressed immediately. We don't need a long drawn out review to do that. There should be pay caps introduced where a publicly funded body has pay scales that are aligned with the public service. We'd also like to express some concern. I mean, one of the things that's at the centre of all this, in our view, is how what is supposed to be a public service broadcaster is infected by its relationship with the commercial sector. And what we do not want to see is that to continue. And when we're talking, I know it's been disabused by the Minister where they're talking about splitting public service from commercial. In our view, RTE should be a fully public service broadcaster that is funded through progressive taxation, and we could raise additional money to do that by, for example, introducing a tax on social media companies, streaming companies and so on, who are making enormous profits. But we do not want a situation to persist where RTE is impacted negatively in the way it has been by a relationship with commercial interests, because to us that is a central part of what has happened here. So what we need is immediate measures taken by the government to introduce salary caps and then to safeguard the public service broadcasting model and to listen crucially to the ordinary workers and journalists and staff in RTE about how we change the culture to make it fair and end this incredible disparity between a small group of people at the top and the vast majority of ordinary workers and journalists in RTE. The other thing I just want to highlight in that regard, which I think is connected and is something I've had great difficulty trying to get media interest, but maybe what's happened in RTE might awaken interest in this. This Thursday there's going to be a debate in the Dáil, which I requested, on the budget scrutiny report on the Section 481 film tax credit, which is a tax credit which dishes out in excess of €100 million a year to film producer companies. And I asked for this report to be done by our committee because there have been long-standing allegations by performers and actors and writers and film crew that this huge amount of public money that is going to film producers is happening against a background of the systematic denial of basic employment rights to the film, to the actors, the performers, and to the film crew. So, in other words, there's a big parallel here between what we've seen in RTE and what's going on in the Irish film industry, or at least what's being alleged to have gone on. And in our report, which the recommendations for which were adopted by the committee, but were put forward by me on behalf of film crew and actors, have gone as far as writing to the European Commission to say we believe there are actually flagrant breaches of the EU copyright directive in terms of the residuals and royalties of actors and performers, and systematic abuse of fixed term contracts. Now, this directly relates to RTE because 40 million of RTE's annual expenditure goes to the independent productions account. And in our view, there's no proper oversight, scrutiny and governance of what is the public getting for that, and is that subsidising the abuse of rights for actors and performers and film crew, in the same way we've started to get a glimpse in terms of RTE. So that needs to be seriously investigated, because huge amounts of public money is going in. And don't get me wrong, in the same way as I want to see public service broadcasting properly funded and protected, I also want to see the Irish film industry properly funded and protected. But there has to be a quid pro quo, that there's proper governance, and that we have fair treatment of the ordinary workers, the performers, the actors, the journalists, the people who actually make these things happen. And I hope the controversy in RTE will lead to that, and actually ensure that we have a properly funded but well organised and properly overseen public service broadcasting and Irish film industry.
So I'm going to talk about a protest that is being held in Cork this Friday. But I think when you consider the issues at stake, this is a protest of national significance. And I want to extend my support and solidarity to the people who will be marching. The group of workers we're talking about here are workers at the Cork City Library. Now, for several months now, and on a regular basis, they have been subject to intimidation. They've been subject to harassment from far-right activists who come into their workplace objecting to LGBTQ books that are available in the library. We even had a situation where we had a book ripped up earlier in the year. Workers have been subjected to abuse. They've had paedophile slurs hurled at them. They've been filmed against their wishes, and they're fed up with the situation. We had a situation recently where 4 young people who were peace activists were slung out of a hall in UCC for daring to interrupt and heckle the Taoiseach. I think the treatment that was meted out to them stands in sharp contrast to what happens when you have rank and file library workers subjected to treatment of a very different kind, far worse scenario. But the workers are taking action. Last week, workers walked off the counter in the Central Library in Grand Parade when this crew showed up. And this Friday, they're assembling outside the library at 12:30. Other workers in Cork City Council, at the very least members of Forsa, but we'll see as to whether others, will join the demonstration and will march from the City Hall, from the Central Library to the City Hall, demanding that the top brass, the City Hall management, who have a legal responsibility to them and to protect them, to protect their health and safety, is prepared to take stronger measures than they have taken so far, which has been little or nothing in reality. And I will be there on Friday to support those workers. I would appeal to the people of Cork, library users, many of them, to come down and to join that demonstration on Friday. I don't think this is just an issue for library workers, and I don't think this is just a local issue. This is an issue with a wider significance for the whole country and for the rights of workers, their health and safety, and also sending a message to the far right and their intimidation and harassment of working people. So it's in a few days' time, but I think, as the week progresses, this is something that is deserving and worthy of some media attention and comment. It's a very significant demonstration.
Over the last couple of weeks, the government, in response to our criticism of the very stacked nature of the so-called consultative forums and our warning of the drive to militarisation and drive towards NATO by the government's response has been largely to have soothing words to say, don't worry, there's no process of militarisation taking here, suggesting that we were scaremongering in some way. However, at the same time as they give those soothing words to people, the actions they take are in direct contradiction to what they're saying. And they are continuing on a track of engaging in further and further European militarisation. So this week we have being presented before the Dáil is a motion by the government to approve Ireland's participation in 4 European Defence Agency projects. They are: 1, the collaborative procurement of chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear equipment. 2, collaborative procurement of soldier equipment. 3, collaborative procurement of ammunition. And 4, military computer emergency response team operational network. And they've allocated a mere 55 minutes for debate in the Dáil on this, which we're objecting to. We're going to call for a proper debate, and we'll also be opposing these motions and calling on the rest of the opposition and anyone on the government side who opposes militarism to join us in opposing these motions as well. What these are about is the drive to further militarisation on a European scale, the drive to give more and more money to the armaments manufacturers who are having unprecedented profits since Putin's horrendous invasion of Ukraine. On a global basis, last year there was $2.2 trillion spent on armaments. 55% of that was spent by NATO countries. Within the European Union in 2022, the announced increase in military expenditure by all the European Union states combined for the coming years is more than the total amount that they spent on armaments in 2020. So it's absolutely obscene that in a world faced with the disaster of climate change, of biodiversity loss, that literally trillions of dollars of public money are being spent on weapons of death and destruction, which only offer a nightmarish world of war, of environmental destruction and so on. So instead of Ireland participating in these projects, the aim of which is explicitly to encourage the further development of a European so-called defence industry, in other words, the armaments manufacturers in Europe getting their fair share of the pie, Ireland should have nothing to do with this process. Ireland should not be part of this process of European militarisation and common arms procurement through the European Defence Agency.
Just on the Summer Economic Statement Office is going to be out today, set out the budget parameters. Is there anything in particular you want to see, given that there is going to be a bumper package there?
Yeah. Ordinary workers and pensioners and people on disabilities and social welfare recipients, all of them have seen their real income slashed as a result of the rises in cost of living and the rising cost of housing, whether it's mortgages or whether it's rents. So we want, as an absolute minimum, that there will be wage increases, pension and income increases as an absolute minimum to meet the rate of inflation, and to take everybody in this country who's currently living in poverty above the poverty line. When the country is literally swimming in money, it has more money than it knows what to do with. The idea that we have hundreds of thousands of people living in poverty, and we have workers who've seen thousands lost in terms of their real income. We need to ensure that the budget lifts people out of poverty and at least gives people wage increases and income increases that match the rising cost of living and housing.